Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Indy here with Emptor Audio. I'm also the editor-in-chief of HomeTheaterReview.com. Well, today we're taking a look at the, pretty sure it's pronounced Eytse. I think that's how it's pronounced. It's E-Y-T-S with a backwards E on this thing. It's a regular E, on their website, of course. But pretty sure it's pronounced Eytse. I mean, that would make the most amount of sense there. But this is their P60 audio amplifier. And this thing is, at first glance, it seems pretty run-of-the-mill. Looking at first glance, you look at the specs, you're like, yeah, pretty run-of-the-mill here. But they're really trying to kind of push something a little bit different, kind of give you a little bit extra bang for the buck on this amplifier. That's kind of my takeaway on this. First thing you're going to notice, and I always like to clear this up really quick on a lot of these Class D amplifiers, is they're going to claim, it can do 300 watts by 2. Yeah, it kind of can, but there's some asterisks there. You need, of course, a bigger power supply than the one included in the box. Of course, if you're going to do that, go with a higher quality power supply as well, too. That's usually kind of one of the weak sides of all these amplifiers you get. They're going to be in that sub $300 category. The power supplies are not fantastic. Now again, though, if you try to push 300 watts through this thing, can it do it? Yeah, but you're going to also be running probably a lot of heat, too, so I'd be careful about doing that. I would say run the standard voltage power supply, just get a better quality one. If you ask me what I would do on that, that's what I would do. Now this thing does have Bluetooth, RCA, of course, inputs. That's nothing new, of course. You can do things like upgrading your interconnects is always a great way to get better sound here and there on some of these amps. Bluetooth, of course, is always about the same. If you're just Bluetoothing from your phone, from a tablet, something like that, you, of course, do that. Not really anything to upgrade there exactly, other than, of course, the device itself. Now, this thing does have some bass and treble adjustments. One thing I noticed that was kind of odd on this is the bass adjustment is plus or minus 14 dB, and the treble is plus or minus 6 dB. So you have a lot more bass range you can play with there. I usually don't adjust the bass and treble too much depending on the amp. Whenever I test amps, I go right to 12 o'clock on both. So I want to see these things just kind of at a flat, flat set there and see how they sound. The P60 I think sounded pretty good. I really had no, issues or qualms with how this thing sounded. I made some minor adjustments. I pulled the bass up a hair. My 2 cents on the sound a little bit. I thought the high was a little tingy, a little sharp at the top end, so I lowered my treble adjustment down just a hair, and that kind of softened it, maybe warmed up a little bit. If you want to run, say, like a tube channel in front of this thing as like a preamp, it will kind of warm up that a hair as well too. Kind of give yourself a little bit less sharpness, a little bit less tinginess on the top end there. So that's kind of what I found a little bit to, just make it sound a tad better right out of the box. One thing I always judge really heavily on these amps is the volume control. This thing actually is a really nice quality volume control in here. It doesn't have, it doesn't step up or down too quick. It doesn't sound too crazy or anything to it. It's just an overall pretty nice volume control on here. So I think that was nailed pretty well. You do, of course, get some of the nice soft pads on the bottom. Nothing, out of the ordinary here, but as long as you have them, you're good to go. Now, one of the big selling points on this amp is going to be that kind of top glass window. There's a bit of a blue backlight on there, which it's cool how they did this because it's not too bright of a backlight. It's not too light. It's just there. I do wish there was a way to disable that backlight. It would be nice. I know a lot of people don't like the backlight, or you want to disable it, or even having a different color. I know some brands have offered like an orange or a blue option there, so you can kind of change that if you want. But I would say just have a switch turned off would be the best way to go for that. I know not everyone likes that. I don't really mind it, but again, I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, the backlight, I don't like the backlight. Can we turn this off somehow? Some people might even just pop it open and disable it that way too. But just having a switch for that would be a great way to kind of improve that just a tad, small improvements there. On the backside, nothing out of the ordinary here. We got the power supply input. I love these little, I don't know if there's a name for them, but they're the 5-way binding posts. But these are kind of like the mini versions, mini 5-way binding posts, I guess you could say there. So I love these things, of course. I always love to judge the backs on these things. How cramped is all the stuff back here? These are actually pretty nice. Everything is laid out nicely. It makes sense, the layout in the back here. It's not too cramped. Some of these things, if you got A and B speakers, these 5-way binding posts can get pretty cramped pretty quick. That's always a downside there. RCA inputs outputs on the back here are nice spacing on here. They're decent quality. I don't really see any issues on the back here at all. So that's pretty much the overall package of the P60. Listening to this thing, yeah, it's Class D, you know, of course. It's going to be really what you're looking for. I found this amp to be very balanced. I don't like using the word, you know, like neutral too often. It doesn't really mean anything to me a lot of times. But I didn't really find anything that was like, this thing doesn't sound that great. I also didn't find like this thing is absolutely amazing, blows me out of the water. But at the price point for this thing, what you're going to find this thing at for around 140 bucks. Let me check the current Amazon pricing on this thing right now. 120 bucks, and there's a $30 off coupon. So you're getting this thing for under 100 bucks, which is honestly not a bad deal. When it comes to these, and again, I don't like to use the word either, chi-fi, but it kind of honestly is. When you get a lot of these chi-fi amps, there are some big jumps in quality. When you go from sub 100, you go from 100 to 200, 200 to 300, you're going to see some pretty large jumps in quality. Now, if you're just using this as like a desktop amplifier, it's going to be a lot harder to discern that quality between those price points. So if you're using this for desktop, I'd say go right for it. If you're using this thing for bookshelf, there might be some better options out there. But for the most part, I think for a lot of bookshelf, you know, very near field listening scenarios, desktop scenarios, this thing's going to do absolutely phenomenal. So, you know, make sure you're keeping yourself within check of, hey, what can this thing actually do? What can it not do? You know, so you're not, you know, getting yourself hyped up too much, this thing saying having, you know, too much of a expectation for this amplifier there. So there's always that to be on the lookout for. Of course, you know, when you want to listen to this thing and you want to really hear it, so I always like to start at a really low volume, kind of listen to how it sounds. Of course, you can hear any of the little bit of buzzing in there. Mine didn't have any buzzing or anything in there. And again, to upgrading the power supply, that will help out quite a bit in a lot of these amplifiers. Get a nice quality power supply. You, of course, eliminate buzzing. Of course, if you don't have a ground loop, again, you know, if you know how to get rid of a ground loop, you'll be a lot better off too. But I don't have that issue. And so I think this thing sounded pretty good at low volume. But yeah, I think the P60 does a good job at what it's trying to achieve. Is there room for improvement? Of course. I think the sound quality is definitely there. Build quality is definitely there. But, you know, there is a sea of these options out there for amplifiers. So, of course, there's plenty of options out there. You can definitely find pretty much what you're going for. 90%, you know, what you want, you can pretty much find now in a lot of these amplifiers. So guys, thanks for watching. Guys, take care. Hope you guys enjoyed the review. You got any questions, leave them in the comments below, and take care, guys.